Good morning, YouTube. Tired Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. In this one today, we're covering a second day of enhanced risk weather across the plains here, more so towards the northern plains this time. We've switched once again. We've been switching back and forth between the southern plains and northern plains. Southern plains does have a severe threat, but that's mainly going to be for wind and hail. This enhanced risk is also driven by hail, but there is a 5% tornado threat over here towards Nebraska, Iowa, and then parts of even South Dakota here, as we're mentioned on the map. Here's the wind threat for both regions, and then the hail threat, we have our enhanced risk over here, over towards the north central plains, and then over here towards Texas and Oklahoma. The hail threat exists as well. There's also a very notable flood threat here, but there's also a hatched risk over here as well, so we could see some pretty significant hail over here towards Texas and Oklahoma. This includes Oklahoma City, Wichita Falls, Norman, Abilene, Midland, Fort Stockton, Fort Hood, a lot of areas. So we'll go ahead and get into the flood threat towards the end of the video here. For right now, we're going to just take a quick look at the models here. So here is our trough. This is what's been causing our severe weather over the last couple of days here. It advances north here, and the timing of this is actually going to set it up where I won't be able to live stream, because this will be about 2 o'clock Central Time, 3 o'clock Eastern. On average, I've usually been getting off at 4, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to get anything going here. Because once we get towards this little first ring here where our low pressure is, by that point, the front passes and we're going to be a more stable air. It's going to even be shown here on this audio, in this sounding here. And I don't know why it's doing this weird thing. There we go. But yeah, you can see right here, based off of the cape here, not sufficient enough for severe weather. We're under 400 joules. We're just over 400 joules per kilogram. You really want to be at 500 for minimal severe weather. So by this point in the night, don't really have too much of anything left to work with here. Best time for severe weather would probably be more so towards 21Z, and really the tornado threat isn't the most impressive thing. It's there, but it's not incredible. Yesterday's setup was a lot more suited for tornadoes, but in this one we're looking more linear here. There's plenty of decape here as well. I'm trying to highlight this, but it won't let me, sadly. But at 842 joules per kilogram, that's pretty impressive there. There is some low-level wind shear, so tornado threat can't be ruled out, but based off of this model run, I'm not super impressed with it. You can look at the, we can take a closer look at this region, look at the rest of the kinematics at the low levels, and from what we see here, there is a little pocket that develops right here, but that's so close to the low that we might have a little bit of trouble with that. I'm going to try and click and see what happens. Okay, here's a tornado sounding right here. Decent curve in the low-level hordeograph here. Decent storm relative felicity, but significant tornado parameters are pretty low. There is a very weak cap that should break, given the fact that we're so close to that low pressure. That's going to be our point of lift here. And then we move this along, and then of course as we go on, once that low kicks in, we're going to have a hard time keeping a tornado threat going. Well, actually, maybe not. This is actually a really good hordeograph here as well, which is interesting. Mid-levels look a little bit crazy. As far as the look of the hordeograph, it could be a HP type storm. But given the rest of the parameters, I think it's possible to still get tornadoes late in the evening. We might still go live. I don't know. It's going to be sketchy. But that being said, let's go ahead and look at the overall instability over this region here. Okay, so we'll start out with this region further off to the south here. Instability holds out for a good bit of the evening here, especially as we look towards Iowa. We're getting up to about 1,800 joules per kilogram. It's more than sufficient enough, and there's the tornado sounding we were looking at earlier. Like I said, not the most impressive numbers, but they're sufficient enough to maintain severe weather for sure. The greatest cape is definitely going to be more so towards Oklahoma and Texas here. We're getting some really some really Cape-rich environment. We're getting a really Cape-rich environment here. There goes my wordplay, my gracious wordplay. Oh, that's interesting. Tor sounding. Don't know if I would verify this or not. In fact, it doesn't even show up on the significant tornado parameter. However, nonetheless, we'll keep an eye on that as well. It's a marginal risk for tornadoes over here towards Oklahoma and Texas today. And if we look towards southern Texas, we'll go ahead and look at that really quickly too. We have, like I said, Cape's going to be most rich around here early in the evening. And then as time goes on, we'll start to see this die off just a little bit. This is going to be along this front here. And once that moves, we shouldn't have any more problems, at least for the night. There are other slight risks ongoing, so a lot of things are prone to changing at the moment. Once this storm system gets out of here, though, the pattern should be calmer. Last but not least here, let's go ahead and take a look at the composite reflectivity. We're going to pretty much be looking at both regions at the same time here. And we'll watch these storms begin to fire right around 21Z, which would be about 2 o'clock Central, by about 2 or 3 Central. These storms have really started to pick up in mass here. Once we get towards about 7 o'clock Central, I think that's when the tornado threat might increase the greatest. And by that point, we're also seeing a line of storms begin to develop over here. Like I said, big time hail threat with this as well. We'll go ahead and look at the lapse rates in just a minute too. But into the evening hours here, we could see some big time hail over here towards the Texas-Oklahoma line in central Texas. This does look like it's going to last longer than what the models were able to show me here. But we'll go ahead and we're going to have to cover a couple other things real quick before we go. So this is the Weather Prediction Center that we're looking at now. Here's why there's such big talk about the flood threat on my end, is because I actually know a viewer here. He's actually one of my admin on stream. This is not far away from his area, just off to his west, I think, maybe, where we have this moderate risk of flooding, which is a level 3 out of 4. So we definitely have to be concerned with the flash flood threat over here. There could be a slight chance of even a flash flood emergency being issued. Given the fact that we've been having storms heading over these areas over the last week, this isn't surprising, but this is going to be kind of a potential 1-2 punch here. Could see significant storms, not to mention the threat for flash flooding. So make sure that we are weather aware for areas just to the south and west of San Antonio here. Also, last thing to look at here before we go will be the lapse rates here, because that's going to be very telling of the hail threat. So here we are looking at our lapse rates here. I'm going to show the legend really quickly here. When you start getting into the red, those lapse rates are really high, really ideal for hail. Usually it's about 7 degrees Celsius, or a lapse rate of about 7. Hang on, let me make sure I got this right. 7 or 8 degrees Celsius per kilometer. Okay, I couldn't get that out for whatever reason. But as you can see through here, some of these regions are getting up to about 9 degrees plus Celsius per kilogram, which is nuts. So some big time hail is possible here. The hail threat should start to subside once we get later into the evening and even into the overnight hours. Not to say that it can't happen, but the large hail threat is probably going to happen earlier in the day. So that in itself would probably lead me into maybe going live, depending on what time I get home. Hopefully it'll be soon. But that being said, enough rambling for me. Got to get going. Make sure you punch that like button, obliterate that subscribe button, eviscerate that share button. This has been Ty, Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, and hopefully I'll be live today.